The wind screamed through the skeletal trees outside the Blackthorn Inn, a mournful dirge that seemed to claw at the warped wooden walls. Inside room 13, Clara Thorne stood paralyzed, her breath hitching in shallow gasps. The single lantern flickered, casting jagged shadows that danced like specters across the peeling wallpaper. Blood oozed from the cracks in the walls, slow and deliberate, pooling around her boots in a warm, viscous tide. The air thickened with the metallic tang of iron and the sickening undercurrent of decay. From the darkness, a voice, low, guttural, layered with countless others, whispered her name. Clara, it rasped, each syllable dripping with malice. You can't leave. You belong to us now. The door slammed shut with a bone-rattling thud, the lock clicking like a guillotine's blade. Her scream was devoured by the oppressive silence as the walls pulsed inward, the room itself a living, breathing entity. In the cracked mirror, something ancient stared back. Not her reflection, but a presence with hollow eyes and a jagged smile, its hunger palpable. Clara's knees buckled, her hands trembling as she reached for the door, but the mirror's gaze held her, promising an eternity of torment. Clara Thorne was a woman forged in the fires of loss. At 29, her life had unraveled like a cheap sweater, her graphic design job outsourced, her savings drained by medical bills for a mother who didn't survive, and her fiancé, Mark, gone after a tearful confession that he needed space. Her dark brown eyes, once bright with ambition, now carried the weight of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers. Her chestnut hair, usually pulled into a neat bun, hung in loose, tangled strands, framing a face etched with exhaustion. She was slight but wiry, her frame betraying a stubborn resilience that had kept her moving forward even when the world seemed determined to break her. Blackthorn was her last resort, a speck of a town buried in a fog-choked valley in northern Maine. She'd found it by chance, scrolling through budget travel sites on a library computer, her bus ticket purchased with the last of her cash. The Blackthorn Inn's website promised rustic charm for $30 a night, but as her bus rattled into town, Clara saw only decay, a cluster of sagging buildings, their paint peeling like old skin, and streets empty save for the occasional stray dog. The inn itself loomed at the town's edge, a 3-story monolith of warped wood and cracked shingles, its ivy-covered walls resembling veins pulsing with dark intent. The windows glinted dully, like the eyes of a predator lying in wait. Clara hesitated at the entrance, her worn sneakers sinking into the mud. The air was heavy, charged with the promise of a storm, and the inn seemed to exhale a faint, sour breath. She gripped her suitcase, a battered relic from her college days, and pushed open the door. The lobby was a time capsule of faded opulence, a chandelier hung crookedly, its crystals dulled by dust, the air reeked of mildew and something sharper, like blood left to congeal. Behind the counter stood the clerk, a man in his late 50s, gaunt as a scarecrow with skin so pale it seemed translucent. His name tag read Elias, and his eyes, gray, unblinking like polished marbles, fixed on her with unsettling intensity. His thin lips barely moved as he spoke. Room 13. Last one available. Clara's fingers tightened around the key he slid across the counter, its brass cold against her palm. 13, she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Isn't that bad luck? Elias's lips twitched, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Superstitions are for folks with choices, miss. You want the room or not? She swallowed her unease and nodded. She had no other options. The hallway to room 13 was a claustrophobic tunnel, its threadbare carpet stained with patterns that seemed to writhe in the flickering light of a single bulb. Clara's boots thudded softly, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The door to room 13 was heavier than the others, its dark wood scarred with deep gouges, as if something had clawed at it from the inside. The brass number plate gleamed unnaturally, its edges sharp enough to cut. She turned the key, the lock resisting with a grinding screech before yielding. The room was a coffin of neglect. A single bed sagged against one wall, its mattress stained and lumpy, the sheets thin as tissue paper. A chipped dresser squatted beneath a cracked mirror, its surface warped, distorting Clara's reflection into something gaunt and unfamiliar. A lone window, its frame swollen with moisture, overlooked a forest lashed by the gathering storm. The wallpaper, once a cheerful floral pattern, peeled in long strips, revealing gray plaster that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Clara dropped her suitcase, the thud unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. It's just a room, she told herself, rubbing her arms against the chill that seeped into her bones. Just a place to sleep. Sleep, however, was a distant hope. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the creak of the unsettling, each sound like a whisper of warning. Around midnight, Clara bolted upright, her heart pounding. A faint scratching, like nails dragged across wood, came from the walls. She held her breath, straining to listen. The sound skittered, paused, then resumed, closer now, as if something were circling her. She flicked on the bedside lamp, its weak glow barely reaching the corners of the room. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low hum, almost imperceptible, like a voice murmuring just beyond comprehension. She checked the walls, running her hands over the peeling paper, then knelt to peer under the bed. Nothing but dust and shadows. Her pulse slowed, but the hum lingered, a persistent itch in her mind. She crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket to her chin, and told herself it was just the storm playing tricks. Morning brought no relief. The storm had worsened, rain hammering the window like 1,000 tiny fists. Clara's eyes were gritty from lack of sleep, her nerves frayed. On the dresser, she noticed a leather-bound guest book she hadn't seen the night before. Its cover was worn, the leather cracked like old skin, and its pages were yellowed, some sticking together with damp. The early entries were mundane complaints about lumpy beds, cold water, rude staff. But as she flipped further back, the words grew frantic, the handwriting shaky. Don't stay in room 13. It watches you. Margaret H., 1987. The walls whispered my name. I'm leaving before it's too late. Thomas R. 1994. I saw her in the mirror. She's not me. Emily P., 2003. Clara's stomach churned. The final entry, dated 3 weeks ago, was scrawled in red ink. It's still here. It never left. Don't trust the clerk. Anonymous. Her hands trembled as she closed the book. She needed answers. She stormed downstairs, the guest book tucked under her arm. Elias was at the desk, polishing a glass with a rag so filthy it left streaks. His movements were slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving the glass. Who wrote these? Clara demanded, slamming the guest book on the counter. Guests, he said, his voice flat, his gaze still fixed on the glass. These aren't normal comments. People wrote about the walls, the mirror, something's wrong with that room. He finally looked up, his eyes boring into hers, cold and unyielding. Old buildings have stories. Folks get imaginative. You gonna check out early? Clara wanted to scream, to shake him until he explained, but his stare rooted her in place. She backed away, clutching the guest book, and retreated to room 13. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud, the lock clicking as if it had a mind of its own. That night, the scratching returned, louder, more insistent. Clara sat up, her pulse racing, the blanket clutched like a shield. The sound was coming from the mirror. She approached it slowly, her bare feet cold against the warped floorboards. Her reflection was wrong, her eyes too wide, her mouth too small, her skin too pale, like a mask stretched over someone else's face. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the glass, and the surface rippled, liquid-like, sending a jolt through her arm. She yanked her hand back, her breath fogging in the suddenly frigid air. The hum grew louder, forming words that slithered into her mind. Stay, see, become. The mirror's surface darkened, and her reflection smiled, a slow, predatory grin that sent ice down her spine. She stumbled back, tripping over the rug, and the mirror went black as if a curtain had been drawn across it. Clara didn't sleep. She sat on the bed, staring at the mirror, her knees drawn to her chest. The room felt smaller, the walls closer, the air heavier. When dawn broke, she tried the door. The key wouldn't turn. She twisted it harder, her palms sweating, but the lock held fast as if something were gripping it from the other side. She pounded on the door, shouting for Elias, for anyone, but the inn was silent. The window was no better, its frame was rusted shut, the glass unyielding even when she struck it with a chair. Panic clawed at Clara's chest. She was trapped. She forced herself to think, to focus. The guest book, she opened it again, searching for clues. Tucked between the pages was a brittle newspaper clipping, its edges crumbling. The headline read, Tragedy at Blackthorn Inn, Room 13 claims another. Dated 1925, it described a series of disappearances, all linked to Room 13. Guests vanished without a trace, their belongings left behind, their rooms untouched. The inn's owner, Elias Blackthorn, claimed the room was cursed, but locals whispered of rituals in the basement, of a pact with something ancient and malevolent. The final line sent a chill through her. Elias Blackthorn was never charged, but his descendants still run the inn to this day. Clara's gaze darted to the door. Elias. The clerk. Was he a Blackthorn? Was he part of this? Her mind raced, piecing together his cold demeanor, his evasive answers, his unblinking stare. She searched the room again, her hands shaking as she ran them over the walls, the dresser, the floor. Under the bed, a loose floorboard gave way, revealing a small, rusted key and a scrap of paper with one word, basement. Clara gripped the rusted key, its edges biting into her palm. She tried the door again, and this time the key worked, the lock turning with a reluctant groan. The hallway was empty, the inn silent save for the distant howl of the storm. She crept downstairs, avoiding the creaking floorboards, and found a door behind the lobby marked, staff only. It opened to a narrow staircase descending into darkness, the air thick with damp and rot. The basement was a labyrinth of stone corridors, their walls slick with moisture. Flickering bulbs cast long shadows, their buzz like the drone of dying insects. Clara's flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing carved symbols, spirals, eyes, hands with too many fingers, their lines glowing faintly in the dark. The hum was louder here, vibrating in her chest, forming words she couldn't grasp. Her skin prickled, her breath shallow as she followed the sound to an iron door, its surface etched with the same symbols. The rusted key fit perfectly, and the door opened with a groan that echoed like a scream. Inside was a circular chamber, lit by candles that burned with unnatural steadiness. An altar stood in the center, its stone surface stained with dark, crusted patches. Above it hung a mirror, identical to the one in room 13, its surface rippling like a pool of black water. Elias stood before the altar, his back to her, his hands moving in slow, ritualistic gestures. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, devoid of emotion. Clara's throat tightened. "What is this place? What's in room 13? He turned, and his eyes were no longer human, black, bottomless voids that seemed to suck the light from the room. "Room 13 is a door," he said, his voice layered with echoes, as if others spoke through him. "And you've already crossed the threshold." Elias lunged, his movements unnaturally fast, his fingers claw-like. Clara dove to the side, grabbing a candle from the altar. The flame hissed as she threw it, catching his sleeve. He snarled, swatting at the fire, his face twisting into something less human, his jaw elongating, his teeth sharpening. Clara ran, the mirror pulsing behind her, the hum now a deafening roar. "Feed us. Stay. Become." The corridors seemed to shift, the walls closing in, the symbols glowing brighter. Elias's voice or voices echoed behind her, a chorus of screams and whispers calling her name. Her flashlight flickered, casting wild shadows that seemed to reach for her. She stumbled up the stairs, her lungs burning, and burst into the lobby. The inn was alive now, the walls groaning, the floor buckling beneath her. The front door wouldn't budge, the windows unyielding. The hum was inside her head, tugging at her thoughts, promising power, freedom, eternity, if she'd just give in. She remembered the guest book's warnings, "Don't trust the clerk." It's still here. She ran back to room 13, the only place she hadn't tried. The door was open, the room waiting, the mirror glowing with an otherworldly light. Her reflection was gone, replaced by shadows that writhed like smoke. Clara stood in room 13, the walls pulsing like a heartbeat, blood seeping from the cracks, pooling around her boots. The voice was a cacophony now, 1,000 voices screaming, begging, commanding, "Clara, stay. Clara, feed us." The mirror showed not her, but a twisted version, her eyes black voids, her skin gray and cracked, her smile a jagged slash of teeth. The air was thick, suffocating, the room shrinking with every breath. She grabbed the guest book, its weight heavy in her hands, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered with a sound like a thunderclap, and the room screamed, a piercing, inhuman wail that tore through her skull. The walls bled faster, the blood rising to her ankles, hot and slick. Elias appeared in the doorway, his body no longer human. Too tall, too thin, his limbs bending at wrong angles, his face a mask of shadow and teeth. "You can't leave," he growled, his voice a chorus of the damned. "You belong to us." Clara's hand closed around a shard of the broken mirror, its edge slicing her palm, blood dripping onto the floor. She lunged, driving the shard into Elias's chest. He howled, black blood spraying, his body convulsing as it dissolved into ash, the voices screaming in her head. The walls shook, cracks splitting the plaster, the blood rising to her knees. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking with finality. The voice laughed, low and guttural. "Clara," it said, "you can't leave." She pounded on the door, her fists slick with blood, her screams drowned by the hum. The mirror's fragments glowed, reflecting not her, but the thing that lived in room 13, ancient and insatiable, its eyes locked on hers. The walls closed in, the blood rising, and Clara felt herself slipping, her mind fraying as the thing reached for her soul. The Blackthorn Inn stands abandoned now, its windows dark, its doors boarded shut. The townsfolk avoid it, their whispers carried on the wind of the night the screams stopped, the night the lights went out. No one knows what became of Clara Thorne, or Elias Blackthorn, or the countless others who stayed in room 13. The guest book is gone, the mirror shattered, the basement sealed behind a wall of stone. But on moonless nights, when the valley is cloaked in fog, some claim to hear it, a faint hum, a whisper, a name drifting through the trees. And in the shadows of the inn, something waits, patient and eternal, for the next guest to turn the key to room 13.